They sent the signal, knowing no one would come. The alien world of Thera was dying. Its skies were no longer blue, they burned with red fire as enemy warships filled the atmosphere like dark metal clouds. Cities below trembled under constant bombardment, towers collapsed into dust, and the oceans boiled near the impact zones. The Rand defense fleet had fought with courage, but courage was not enough against overwhelming numbers. Their final orbital station shattered only hours ago, leaving the planet open and exposed. Inside a broken command tower high above the capital city, a small group of officers remained their armor, scratched their eyes, tired from days without rest. Screens around them flickered with static and warning lights. Commander Relis stood in the center of the room, staring at the last functioning console. Enemy ships were forming into attack lines, preparing the final strike that would erase what little remained of Thera. "We cannot hold another hour," one officer whispered. Relis already knew that. Their allies were too far. Their reinforcements destroyed their supply lines, cut the enemy empire, had chosen Thera as an example, a message to the galaxy about what happened to those who refused submission. Relis took a slow breath and opened an ancient emergency protocol rarely used and almost forgotten. A long-range distress beacon. It was designed to reach beyond normal communication range far into unknown regions of space. It would drain the last energy reserves of the tower, and once activated, there would be no second chance. Another officer looked at Relis. "No one will answer," he said quietly. Relis nodded. "Perhaps not." But silence was worse. He pressed the activation command. Deep beneath the tower, the final reactor core released a pulse of energy that shot into the sky, breaking through enemy jamming fields and escaping the system as a narrow beam of coded light. The message was simple. "This is Thera. We are under extinction level attack. Any species receiving this signal, we ask only that our story be remembered." Inside enemy flagships, commanders detected the energy spike and laughed. "Desperate creatures," one of them said. "Hope makes them foolish." The enemy fleet tightened its formation, preparing to end the resistance once and for all. On the surface, civilians gathered in shelters, watching the burning sky. Many had already accepted the end. Children clung to parents, elders closed their eyes in silent prayer. Far beyond Thera, far beyond known trade routes, drifting in the darkness between stars, the distress signal continued its journey. It traveled past silent asteroids, through empty voids, across regions mapped and unmapped. For long moments, there was nothing but cold space. Then sensors aboard an unknown vessel detected the narrow beam. Inside that ship, a human officer studied the translated message, his face calm, but his eyes sharp. He turned toward his captain. "We just received a distress call." The captain leaned forward. "Source: unknown world under attack." The bridge grew quiet. Outside the viewport, distant stars reflected against dark armored hull, plating massive shapes, moved in formation around them, silent, powerful, waiting. The captain gave a single order: "Set course for Thera." And in the burning skies above a dying planet, enemy commanders did not yet realize they were no longer alone. The enemy believed the planet was already dead, but space had begun to move. Inside the massive enemy flagship orbiting Thera, the High Commander watched the surface burn through a wide viewing panel, his expression calm, and cold. Rows of warships floated around the planet, weapons charging slowly, preparing for the final cleansing strike. Thera had resisted longer than expected, but resistance always ended the same way, with silence. Deep within the ship, a communications officer suddenly stiffened. There was an unusual reading at the edge of the system. The officer adjusted the sensors, thinking it was interference from debris fields. The signal grew stronger, multiple gravity distortions forming in deep space. "Commander, we are detecting warp signatures." The High Commander narrowed his eyes. "Reinforcements." Impossible. Thera had no allies close enough. The sensors struggled to calculate the number. First 3, then 10, then dozens. The reading kept increasing. Far from enemy sight, massive human warships tore through hyperspace one after another, their engines silent compared to the violent tearing of space around them. Dark armored hulls reflected distant starlight like moving shadows. This was not a patrol. This was a fleet. Inside, the human flagship bridge lights glowed. Softly, crew members worked with steady hand. Screens displayed the burning image of Thera along with enemy fleet formations. Admiral Jonas Hale stood at the center watching carefully. Confirm civilian population status, he ordered. Life signs heavy but decreasing. Enemy fleet count 300 major warships and support vessels. Hale gave a small nod. Prepare defensive formation around the planet. We are not here to conquer. We are here to stop the killing. As the human fleet exited warp space, twisted violently, and then settled into calm darkness, hundreds of ships formed precise lines, shields activating in perfect synchronization. Enemy sensors finally locked onto the new arrivals. The bridge of the flagship erupted with alarm tones. Unidentified fleet size exceeding all estimates. The High Commander stepped forward, staring at the incoming data. Ship designs, unfamiliar power readings, abnormal energy levels far beyond standard galactic models. Send warning transmission, he ordered. A signal shot toward the human fleet. Identify yourselves and withdraw. This sector is under Imperial control. The message reached Admiral Hale. He did not smile. Open channel, he said. His image appeared across enemy command screens. Calm, composed, human eyes steady. This is Admiral Hale of the United Earth Fleet. We received a distress call. There was a long silence. The enemy commander responded with cold authority. This conflict does not concern your species. Leave or be destroyed. Hale looked at the burning planet on his display. It concerns us now. Behind him, human ships shifted position, heavy cruisers sliding into forward stance, carrier vessels opening launch bays, fighters streaming out like silent swarms. The Ran civilians hiding below saw new shapes appear in the sky, massive dark ships placing themselves between the planet and the enemy fleet. For the first time since the invasion began, the bombardment slowed. Confusion spread among enemy lines. They had planned for fear. They had planned for surrender. They had not planned for Deathworlders. And as weapons across both fleets powered up, the High Commander felt something unfamiliar. Uncertainty. They called humans Deathworlders. Now they would understand why. The space between the two fleets felt heavy, like the moment before a storm breaks. Enemy warships glowed with charging weapons, lines of red energy building along their hulls, targeting systems locking onto the newly arrived human formation. Inside the human flagship, Admiral Jonas Hale stood without fear. Hold fire, he said calmly. Human ships remained steady, shields bright, but weapons silent. Fighters moved into defensive arcs around Thera, forming a protective wall between the planet and the Empire fleet. On the enemy bridge, the High Commander interpreted the silence as hesitation. They are afraid, he declared. All ships prepare for a strike. Hundreds of enemy cannons fired at once, beams of light and plasma cutting across space toward the human line. The Ran civilians watching from below closed their eyes, expecting another rain of destruction. But the beam struck something unseen. Human shields flared bright blue, absorbing the impact. Waves of energy spreading across the fleet like ripples across water. No ship moved. No ship fell. The enemy commander stared in disbelief. Fire again, he ordered. Another barrage followed, stronger, more focused. Again, the shields held. Inside, the human bridge officers reported minimal damage. Hale finally gave a quiet command. Return, measured response. From the center of the human formation, a single cruiser moved forward, its weapons glowing not with wild heat, but with controlled white light. One precise beam fired. It did not explode against the enemy line. Instead, it struck the lead Imperial battleship directly at its shield node. The enemy shield collapsed instantly. A second beam followed, disabling its engines. The massive ship drifted powerless. No explosion, no debris, just silence. Panic rippled across the Imperial fleet. Another human ship fired, this time targeting communication arrays of 3 separate cruisers, each shot exact calculated, disabling command relays without harming crew. The RAN survivors watched in shock. These new ships were not fighting with anger. They were dismantling the invasion piece by piece. On the enemy flagship, officers shouted over each other, trying to understand the precision attacks. "They target weaknesses perfectly," one said. "They know our systems." The High Commander felt the ground shift beneath his confidence. How? How could a distant species understand Imperial technology so clearly? Back on the human bridge, tactical displays showed enemy confusion, spreading formation lines breaking slightly as ships attempted to reposition. Hale spoke again. "Increase pressure. Do not destroy unless necessary." Human fighters surged forward, small, fast craft weaving between enemy cruisers, placing electronic disruptors on hull surfaces. Engines of several Imperial vessels shut down simultaneously. Weapons froze mid-charge. Targeting systems went dark. The Imperial fleet, which had arrived as conquerors, now drifted in chaos. And then something changed. A massive signal pulsed from the rear of the Imperial formation. A super-heavy flagship larger than all others powered up, its main cannon energy building to dangerous levels, aimed directly at Thera. The enemy commander had chosen escalation. Inside the human flagship, alarms sounded. "The planet is being targeted." Hale stepped forward, his eyes focused. "Intercept the shot." And for the first time since arriving, the human fleet prepared to show its true strength. The enemy super weapon began to glow. Energy gathered at the front of the massive flagship, forming a sphere of burning white light brighter than any star around it. The weapon was designed to break planets, to end resistance in a single strike. On Thera, the sky turned pale as civilians watched the growing light above them. Many believed this was the end. Inside the human flagship, alarms echoed across the bridge. Impact in 30 seconds. Admiral Jonas Hale did not hesitate. "Deploy Aegis formation," he ordered. Instantly, human ships shifted into motion. Heavy cruisers moved forward in perfect coordination, forming a layered shield wall directly between the enemy superweapon and the planet's smaller support ships, linked power grids, channeling energy into the front line. The enemy commander laughed when he saw the movement. "They think they can block it. Fire." The superweapon discharged a massive beam of pure destructive force, cutting through space, aimed at Thera. But it met the human shield wall. A blinding flash filled the void as the beam collided with the combined shields of dozens of Deathworlder ships. The shockwaves spread across the system. Inside, the human fleet consoles flickered, some hull plating cracked, engines strained under pressure, but the formation held. The beam faded. Thera still stood. Silence followed, then a sound no one expected. Human ships advancing. Admiral Hale lowered his hand. Their turn. From multiple positions across the fleet, coordinated pulses fired, not random, not wild, each beam targeting power conduits along the massive Imperial flagship. One by one, outer shield nodes, collapsed engines, sputtered secondary reactors, overloaded and shut down. The superweapon dimmed. Within moments, the largest ship in the Imperial Armada drifted powerless. Imperial officers stared at their failing systems. Their greatest weapon neutralized without being destroyed. "How is this possible?" one whispered. In the human bridge, a tactical officer reported the enemy fleet losing cohesion. Smaller Imperial vessels attempted retreat. Some tried regrouping, others fired blindly in panic. Hale remained calm. "Launch boarding units." From several human carriers, armored transport craft accelerated toward disabled Imperial ships. Moving fast and precise, they attached to hulls, cutting through metal without explosions. Inside Imperial corridors, human Marines advanced, securing command decks and shutting down remaining weapons. The RAN civilians watched the sky change, the burning red glow replaced by flashes of controlled blue light. Imperial ships, once symbols of fear, now hung silent, surrounded by dark human vessels. Inside the Imperial flagship, the High Commander received a direct transmission. It was Admiral Hale again. "You attacked a civilian world," he said. "You called it order. We call it cruelty. Surrender, and your crews will live." The commander looked at tactical projections, his fleet crippled command, broken allies, scattered across sectors, refusing reinforcement. For the first time in his life, he felt defeat. But far beyond the battlefield, a deeper signal activated, one authorized only by the Emperor himself. Total Eradication Protocol. Hidden Imperial reinforcements began charging warp drives outside the system. The war was not over. It was about to grow bigger, and the Deathworlders were ready to answer it. The battle above Thera was no longer simple. It was becoming something larger. Deep beyond the outer edge of the system, new warp signatures began to form, dozens at first, then hundreds. The Imperial Eradication Fleet was arriving, ships built only for destruction, massive carriers armed with planet-breaking weapons, heavy cruisers layered with reinforced armor. Inside, the human flagship long-range scanners detected the surge. Admiral Hale studied the readings without panic. So the Emperor chooses escalation, he said quietly. Thera had been a warning. Now was a battlefield. On the surface of the planet, alien civilians watched strange new stars appear in the darkness beyond the original fight. Fear returned quickly, whispers spread through shelters. Were the humans not enough? Inside the Imperial Command Network, the Emperor broadcast his order. No retreat, no negotiation, wipe the system clean. Imperial reinforcements entered real space, in perfect attack formation, engines, roaring weapons already charged. They saw crippled Imperial ships drifting powerless and human fleets positioned calmly around the planet. Anger replaced strategy. All ships advance. The void exploded into movement. Human formations shifted again, but this time not just defensive lines. Carrier bays opened fully, waves of strike craft launched in synchronized patterns. Destroyers spread outward, forming layered intercept grids. Admiral Hale addressed every human vessel. Protect the planet at all cost. No civilian losses. Across the fleet, engines surged forward. Human ships accelerated toward the incoming Imperial Armada, not retreating, not waiting, meeting them head-on. The first clash was violent. Imperial heavy cannons tore through space, targeting human front lines, but Deathworlder shields absorbed and redirected energy, while counterfire struck engine cores and shield junctions with impossible precision. Human strategy was not about brute force. It was about control. Smaller human ships darted between larger enemy cruisers, disabling propulsion systems, isolating vessels from formation. Electronic warfare units flooded Imperial sensors with false targets and delayed commands, turning organized assault into confusion. But the Imperial fleet was vast. Some warships broke through outer layers, heading directly toward Thera. Inside the human flagship, a warning flashed. Multiple enemy vessels approaching planetary orbit. Hale gave a single command. Activate last wall. Far above Thera, hidden defense satellites powered on, revealing themselves for the first time. Massive rail platforms fired high-velocity rounds at incoming Imperial ships. Engines ruptured, holes split apart, debris burned in atmosphere. But still more came. On the surface, citizens saw fire streak across the sky again, yet this time human fighters followed every hostile ship, intercepting them before impact. In deep space, the Emperor watched the battle feed. He had conquered dozens of worlds with overwhelming numbers, yet this single species stood unbroken. Why do they fight so hard for strangers, he demanded. No one answered, because the truth was simple. Humans did not fight for territory. They fought for those who could not defend themselves. Back near the center of the conflict, Admiral Hale prepared his fleet for one final coordinated strike. The Imperial Eradication Fleet was powerful, but was losing order. And once order breaks, defeat follows. The Deathworlders were about to end it. Not with rage, but with certainty. Hope was never gone. It was only waiting. The Imperial Eradication Fleet was still large, still armed, still dangerous, but its formations were broken ships, drifted out of sync, commands delayed by human interference, panic spreading faster than strategy. Inside the human flagship, Admiral Jonas Hale watched the battle map. Carefully read markers flickered across the display, many already disabled, others retreating without orders. This ends now, he said quietly. All fleets execute final pattern. Across the void, human warships shifted into a massive circular formation surrounding the remaining Imperial core vessels, not attacking, yet not firing, simply enclosing them. Imperial commanders realized too late they were trapped not by destruction, but by position. Every escape route covered, every warp vector blocked. The Emperor demanded full power to all weapons. But weapon systems responded with error codes. Human cyber units had already penetrated deeper than expected. Targeting computers froze reactor outputs, where limited shields weakened at specific nodes. The Imperial advantage was gone. Admiral Hale opened a system-wide channel, his voice calm, steady, without anger. "This is the United Earth Fleet. Stand down and your crews will survive. Continue and your fleet will be permanently disabled." There was silence. Imperial officers looked toward their emperor, waiting for pride to answer. Instead, fear spoke first. One by one, Imperial ships power down weapons. Engines reduced to idle. Formation lights dimmed. The massive eradication fleet surrendered without another shot. On Thera, the sky slowly cleared, smoke and debris drifting away as human ships maintained orbit. Civilians stepped out from shelters, staring upward at the dark shapes that had shielded them from extinction. Inside the Imperial flagship, the Emperor transmitted a final message directly to Admiral Hale. "Why answer a signal from strangers?" he asked. Hale paused before replying. "Because once we were the ones who sent that signal." The answer carried weight across the silence. Humans understood desperation. They understood being alone against impossible odds. And they had promised long ago that if they ever gained strength, they would not ignore those cries. Imperial ships were escorted from the system, weapons locked under human supervision, no worlds destroyed, no species erased, only power balanced. The Deathworlder fleet began slow withdrawal, leaving behind defensive platforms to protect Thera until it could rebuild. The RAN leaders sent gratitude across every open channel, but most human vessels had already entered warp space, vanishing into darkness as quietly as they arrived. Far across the galaxy, the story spread. A dying world sent a final distress call, believing hope was lost. And the Deathworlders answered, not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as guardians. And from that day forward, whenever a faint signal traveled through empty space, carrying fear and desperation, the galaxy remembered, if humans hear it, someone will come.